Welcome to a Sleepover with Yuri Season 3. If you've ever been categorized as a minority, whether for being an immigrant or LGBTQ or a person of color, well, guess what? You are in a majority on my show. A Sleepover with Yuri is a show that celebrates diversity, promotes equality, raises awareness, and spreads love. In Season 2, I talked a lot about mental health and our spiritual body. Most religions and beliefs recognize two bodies, physical and spiritual, also known as soul. We are very well aware of our physical body, but not so much of our spiritual body, and there is still a lot of stigma in talking about one's soul. Spirituality involves the recognition of a feeling or sense or belief that there is something greater than myself, something more to being human. In Season 3, I will be talking with my guests about their spiritual experiences, and as I believe that spiritual awakening may be a solution to our emotional problems and a key to happiness. My guest tonight is a drug addict in recovery who went through hell and was able to get out of hell thanks to his spiritual awakening. Tonight, I want to find out what kind of spiritual awakening he had. Please let me welcome my guest, Manny. Hey, Manny.
Hey, Yuri.
Welcome back to Season 3.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm excited about the sleepover. I don't have many guests who come back, but I do have a couple, and it's always so much fun for me to see you guys and catch up and see how you've been since the last time that we filmed this. And last time that when we talked, we addressed the mental health issues and the drug addiction, and you talked about that. And today, this episode, this season, we're talking about a solution and focusing on spiritual awakening, which is a different side of the story that I am eager to find out and hear from you.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me back.
Yes.
Congratulations on Season 3. It's
Thank
good to
you.
be here. Hi, Mom. Sorry. And, it's a fascinating topic, the spiritual awakening, because of the fact that it's strange, but for me, being in the rooms of recovery, it almost seemed for many people like a taboo topic, because there are many folks that I've encountered, and even points in my life where I've questioned spirituality, I've questioned religion, I've questioned, the higher power as we talk about it. So for us to be talking about it today in depth is exciting, and it's going to be an interesting challenge.
Yes. Before you had the awakening, before you got sober, could you tell me more about that life? Like what did your life look like before sobriety?
You know what? I would say it was a life like any other child, adolescent, early, a young adult. It was filled with moments that were happy. It was filled with moments that were sad. There are traumas from childhood. There are things that went on that contribute, I'm sure. But there was never a really long period of despair and unhappiness that led me to want to do these things.
So when you picked up drugs and you were in your active addiction, would you say that your life was, you had a good life? You were happy with it?
Well, here's the thing. I was very young. I was in my early 20s. I was just discovering, New York City as an adult. And the people that I was hanging out with seemed like the greatest people, the most fun people. They're good people, don't get me wrong. But everything just seemed like, a candy store. It seemed like an amusement park. Every ride I wanted to get on, even if it scared me a little bit, I went on that ride to see what happened. And I think that that's a big reason on how it went from just socially drinking into experimenting with the party drugs. It was just like, let's just see where that ride is going to go. Everything's been fun now. It's got to be fun doing that too.
But when you say you wanted to see where this ride was going to go, were you looking for a specific ride? Were you looking for a specific journey? Because a lot of, not everybody just goes out there and starts using drugs, especially with the, being that it's taboo in our society. But you mentioned that you wanted to see where this ride was going to go. Was it that you were looking for some answers and, in life? What was exactly the reasoning behind, especially because you were doing it for such a long time?
Right. As we're talking about it, I'm thinking so much about standing in one club in particular in the Roxy, and the first time that I remember going out with coworkers and someone handing me something to try. And it just was an experimentation. It was curiosity. It wasn't necessarily I want to forget what's happening in my life, or I just want to get obliterated. I just want to have as much fun as I can have in this moment right now. Later on, as that continued and I would do more of the partying and stuff like that, then it started to interfere with being an adult. Being an adult is getting up, going to work, getting to work on time, doing your job. Sometimes I'd be sick at work because I'm having a reaction from whatever it was I did a couple of days before. There's the no call, no show. All of those things, unfortunately, were part of the story.
Right. So how long exactly were you doing hardcore drugs for?
So I started around 21, 22, and then up until I was 38 or 39. I think I was 38, I can't remember.
You were doing hardcore drugs all this time?
Yeah, there was a mix of lots of different things. And the later that we get into the story, the scarier it is.
So what's the scariest part of the story?
The scariest part of the story that I hope that no one ever gets to is having, the stuff in my hands and going, if I do any more, it could kill me. But going, you know what? F it. And going for it anyway.
And why would you F it if it could possibly potentially kill you?
Well, that's where the mental health comes in. That's when my body was not in a balance anymore and I wasn't thinking clearly because of what I'd been doing to my body with the drugs exacerbated my mood disorders, I'm sure.
But would you say that doing drugs for you was just simply just looking for fun, or it was more as a cure for some underlying issues and for the fact that you might not have been satisfied with life?
It's definitely that transition from being a 20-something-year-old, naive, to a degree, young man in New York City, just looking to have a good time and looking to meet friends and not feel like I stand out so much. To the point where, I'm in a home, in an apartment, in a hotel with the lights drawn, the windows and the shades are drawn, no light, and just not wanting to leave that darkness. There definitely went to that way of life.
So what would you say was your rock bottom when you were using your active addiction?
I love this question. I was actually talking about this recently, and thankfully, I never had any incident with the law. I never ended up in the emergency room because of my using directly. My rock bottom, I picture it like this. I was dragging at the bottom, just being pulled along for a period of time. So it was a big picture, a series of incidents that made it a rock bottom. Yeah.
And if you could just travel back in time and try to stay there for a little bit. When you mentioned that room with the curtains down, the darkness, do you remember what was going through your head back then? Like, how did you feel about yourself? How did you feel about your life? What did you think about it?
There was no life. There was no life. If at the rate that I was going, it was a formula for permanently hurting myself or death, unfortunately.
And why were you doing this? Why were you hurting yourself?
Still trying to figure that out, and that's where the sobriety comes in and learning about myself, how I operate, working with professionals for mental health frequently.
Well, now that you're working with, I understand that sometimes we don't understand why we do certain things, but you said that you're working with professionals and there were some traumas in your childhood and you're not quite sure why you were using drugs so intensely and to the extent where you were hurting yourself, you could have potentially died. With the help of professionals, and if you try to figure out now, would you say there were any type of childhood traumas or scenarios or situations that could have possibly caused the drug addiction?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Like what?
I'll be honest with you. It's a mixture of different events that happened in my life.
Well, what is the example?
Emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Yeah, those were part of it.
I'm sorry to hear that. So those traumas before you picked up drugs, after emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, what was your coping mechanism after the abuse and before you picked up drugs? What was going through your head? How did you feel about life? And what were the tools to help you move on with that?
You know what? The coping mechanisms didn't really manifest themselves, as I'm remembering now, until I was around that 21 to 25 years of age, where I started to remember my childhood, or there was a trigger that would give me a flashback of something, or I would think of a scenario and go, you know what, that wasn't right. That wasn't a safe place or scenario for a child. And so the drinking especially, I'll tell you what about drinking. The drinking in the beginning, but toward the end of my usage, when I was done partying, when I was done for the day, I would pick up a pint of ice and fill it full of either tequila or vodka. And that's what would bring me down. And then I would go through whatever emotions I didn't have when I was using drugs. They came out with the alcohol, and that was the reliving and the crying and the thinking about all the despair in life. And again, that whole thing about the dragging at the bottom for the rock bottom, I've been so blessed, and I'm sure we're going to talk about my higher power in this at some point. A week or two later, when I was done sleeping and eating, from not sleeping and eating, that's when I started to go, okay, here are the possibilities. And these possibilities only came, I believe, my possibilities were given to me by my higher power, by my God, that said, you know what, it's right here. You can, yes.
So Manny, let me just go over, because it's a very, it's a lot. Drug addiction itself and, the traumas. But if I just look at what you said and try to summarize that. So we had a child who was abused emotionally, physically, sexually, which caused a trauma. Trauma comes with pain, and the pain was numb with drugs for many, many years because you didn't want to subconsciously deal with it. Alcohol would help you relive it whenever you could. And then drinking and drugging and living with the trauma but not taking care of that took you to the darkness where you were self-destructive and hurting yourself to the extent where you could potentially die and you didn't even care. So I would call this probably was your rock bottom where you're dying and you don't care. So when that happens, so what happens next? How do you get to the point where you choose to get sober and experience a spiritual awakening which helps you get sober? So tell me more about that.
Okay, so this process that you're describing right now is one of my favorite parts when I talk about my experience in my life. And again, from my drugs of choice, I would sleep for about a week or two. Once that week or two would pass, then I would wake up and I would start to think about, I'd get curious. I'd think about possibilities. What could I do with my life if I took the same energy that I did to drink and get high, if I put that toward other things, toward living the wildest dream? That's where that comes from.
So when did you have that idea? When did you have that thought?
Well, it's not one that's come up once. I'm very blessed and I'm very lucky that I've had many opportunities to pull myself back together and snap back.
But do you remember, is there a day or a moment of time where you consciously, clearly remembered that you decide for yourself that I'm done with this, I'm done with drugging and drinking, I want to get sober?
Good question. Do you know what it is, Yuri? It never was a thing of I'm done with that. It was more I'm looking more forward to this. It
Forward
shadowed
to what?
Forward to being healthy, forward to making $1, hoping to be looking forward to being independent, to living my life.
And when did that thought come around?
Well, the last one that stuck,
Yeah.
that one happened probably the last time that I used, and I was on my way to my doctor because I wasn't feeling well. And I was crossing the Williamsburg Bridge, and I don't know if I've told you this before, but the deal was I'm either going to go to the hospital and get well and let them take care of me so I can take care of myself, or I'm going to come back and I was going to jump off the Williamsburg Bridge.
Oh.
Yeah, it was very that.
So that's the point where you were suicidal. So what made you choose health over death?
Just again, that curiosity, that what can I do if I challenge myself? What can I do if I have that opportunity?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's when you came to sobriety.
It is.
Okay. So, Manny, this is, and thank you for being so honest and transparent. I understand it must be a very difficult and personal subject to talk about. So, you went through the darkness, you got to a point where it's suicidal, it's either death or health, and health to you is just curiosity to see, is there a life without drugs, and what type of life would that be? And so you turned to sobriety at this point.
Yeah.
And for you, sobriety was a form of a spiritual awakening. So tell me more about that. How were you introduced to spirituality through sobriety, and did you have a specific moment where you felt, wow, this is it, this is spiritual awakening?
You know, I think that every day that I'm lucky enough to get up out of bed and get to work or wherever it is that I need to go, there's a small spiritual awakening that happens there. And I think that awakening is based in gratitude. And because I get up and I just look around at my home and I go, oh, wow, thanks. You know, the fact that I get to go to work, the fact that I'm in a relationship that's really great, it's all gratitude. It really is all gratitude. It's never, and here's the thing, is it's not pinpointed at one particular time. I can tell you that even though I used and I put myself in these horrible places, there was something or someone that was giving me this opportunity to stay alive, to keep on moving to the next moment, to see what I could do to better myself.
In sobriety, recovery, and I understand you do a lot of different things for recovery. It's therapy and retreats and the 12-step program, as I understand. Do all those programs, the recovery programs, do all of them teach spirituality and focus on spirituality?
Okay, I can only speak for myself and what I have absorbed in almost 4 years of being in the rooms, as we call it. Thank you. There's, to me, what I've heard, there's been a lot of talk of spirituality, of the spiritual awakening. And, you know, we don't talk about the Bible and we don't talk about certain things, but there are certain aspects of being in the rooms where it does teach about, again, the gratitude. It does teach about something being bigger than ourselves, that's providing opportunities and chances for us to grow and to get better and to be loved and to love.
When you were suicidal and death was a choice, an option, not a choice that day, thank God. So that day and that time, you had your higher power talk to you, give you a message that you should choose health?
Give me options, yeah, absolutely.
So does it mean that you had your higher power with you in your journey all this time, even when you were in the darkness of addiction and the dark room with no light and using drugs, was your higher power there with you?
I believe that my higher power is always watching over me.
Okay.
Whether I'm communicating and I'm connecting to my higher power.
But when did
that's a
that
different
belief
story.
come along?
It's always been there. I never since childhood, never lost it. I just wasn't practicing it. Just wasn't talking to my higher power. Just wasn't communicating. My heart goes out to people with suicidal ideations because in other times when I've not been under the influence, where I haven't felt very happy, very healthy, questioning would suicide be the way out. It's such a lonely place. It's such a sad place, and I don't wish that for anyone. I would hope that, taking a minute, rather than hurting yourself, taking a minute and going, okay, what else can I do? Can I get help? Is there help out there? Yes, there's help.
And that's what I'm hoping to figure out here, and using you as an example as a drug addict in recovery. So as I started this episode, and as I start every episode, season 3, I mentioned that I believe that spiritual awakening can be a key to happiness, emotional happiness, and a solution to emotional problems. And so if there were drug addicts out there watching this episode who are not in recovery, based on your experience with recovery, 4 years, great number, and your personal experience, what would you suggest to those people? How should they find spiritual awakening, if they should at all? And what would that spiritual awakening be for them?
Well, I would say to the person that's currently, whatever the addiction is, and they're wrapped up in that addiction, I would say in this instance, the grass can definitely be greener on the other side of the fence. There can be happiness, there can be life, help, and healing. Then it's up to the person to say who or what is it that's helping them to get there, what is controlling or what is influencing. I think that's where the heart and soul of the awakening comes in, is taking that first step and taking the second step, and then the aha moment. What is it?
So what is the first step again? Sorry.
Just whatever it is, taking that first step away, since we're talking about addiction, taking that first step away from the addiction.
And what is the first step away from the addiction?
I guess for me, it was stopping. For me, it was stopping and getting help. Not being afraid to surrender and let other people help me until I could help myself, as I said earlier.
Would you say that in your case, the spiritual awakening or spiritual experiences help you get sober, or it's not your situation?
Definitely, because, when I think back again from where I am now, where I am sober, going backward, playing the tape, there were flashes of moments where, I realized that I'm somehow lucky for still being alive. And where does that come from? And that was a little bit of the fuel for me to get to where I was that day crossing the bridge on the train, is those small doses of remembering, believing, having faith that something or someone can cure me or help me.
So you had faith that something can help you, something greater than you. And you mentioned also you're lucky because your aunt introduced you to the concept of higher power, and not everybody has been introduced to that when they were kids. However, in your story, you believed already in the power greater than you. Do you remember if there was a specific message that you asked your higher power to help you get sober? Was there a specific prayer or message or anything that you said to the higher power to help you get sober? Do you remember that?
Do you know what, and I hope this answers your question, is over time and the older that I get, I have to remind myself that my higher power, that God, is not my ethereal ATM machine for blessings and for prayers. So I find myself, it's more about thanks. At this point in the game, it's about thanks. And we talk about, the spiritual awakening. walking from here to my home, seeing butterflies, looking at the sky, breathing air, being able to eat food, that to me is all part of this big picture, this big spiritual awakening. It's so much, if I could bring it to a point, it's gratitude and thanks. And I know that we hear that a lot in the program because I know about that, having been in the rooms. But outside of that, and outside of being in a church or religion or anything, it's thanks, it's being thankful, taking that chance for positive things, and then being thankful when you get that opportunity.
Also, I like the gratitude is for you. So as far as I understand, a form of spiritual awakening for you is finding gratitude for all the things that surround you, all the experiences that you have or had, and the life that you're living. Being present, being in the moment, appreciating the butterflies, like you said. And just have the awareness of the life that you're living. So Manny, to wrap it up, just again, let me summarize everything. For you, the drug addict who got to a point where life didn't matter, death was an option, and someone who was able to get sober and get out of that hell and stay sober for 4 years, who believes that spirituality is a solution to drug addiction and to a sober, happy life. So in your words, spiritual awakening is gratitude. Just finding gratitude for things that surround you, for your life, for all the experiences that, whether bad or good, and desire to be with God and be healthy. So does that sound accurate? Does that sound right?
You put a lot in there for me, yes. All of it. Absolutely, yes. Thank you.
Well, it's not the first episode, so it's I already got some experience.
Right.
All right, well, Manny, thank you so much. I'm so happy. I'm grateful for you to be here, and I'm grateful for your sobriety. It's such a wonderful person, and hard to believe that there was a moment of life for you when death was an option. I really hope that it will never happen again, and I hope that it will not happen to the people who watch the episode. And let's just all do what Manny does and focus on gratitude and be grateful for everything we have and don't have, and thank God for that, right?
That's right.
Awesome. All right, well then, on that bright note, we can go to bed with a spiritual awakening as gratitude. Thank you, Manny.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Good night.